In this tutorial, we're going to continue looking at file management in VBA, and we're going to end by looking at how to save workbooks and close them. And these are two very important things in the flow of data automation, and so let's begin. Um, so to set this up, let's have you open the file management macro file. So let's open this workbook up here. And let's go to our code. What we need to do is I want to have you go to Working with Workbooks module. So here's the Working with Workbooks module. And I want you to scroll down to the very bottom where it says Save and Close Workbook. Now this subroutine right here is going to do just that. It's going to um, set a file path of where you want to save the particular file. It's going to allow you to assign a name to it if you want, and then it's going to actually save it and close it. Well, let's set this up together. So the first thing we want to do is we want to open that that tax ID file that's in your folder. Remember that in your data automation course folder, we have a file called File Management Tax ID Data. And remember that in this subroutine, we hard-coded opening that workbook. So all you got to do to open it is click here and click play. And you can see that it ran through the subroutine and opened our file called File Management Tax ID Data. Great. Now let's say that, as a part of the macro, you also want to save this, but let's say you want to save it as a different name. So come down to Save and Close Workbook, and let's start to F8 through this and see what it looks like. So I'm going to click F8, F8. Now, I got two lines here I want to talk to you about. The first line is this. We're familiar with this line already. We learned it up here. We're going to set the file path. So that's going to point a file path to your desktop and then to your data automation course folder on your desktop. But what I wanted to do was highlight what this little chunk of code Environ user profile does. It's a really nice chunk of code and it's really simple. Below here, you'll see I have the same link path. So notice that it's going, notice that this link path is going to your data automation course folder on your desktop. But look at this. Here we have your hard drive, so your C drive. Then in that, we're going into a users folder. Then in that, we're going into my username. So this is my username on the computer. If we come here, I can show you what I mean. So we're going to go to our C drive. We're going to go to our users folder. And then you're going to see that I have, this username on my, and yours is different. Yours is your username. So this is hard coding in the path to the desktop. That's okay, but oftentimes we make macros for other people to use on their machines. And so if you used this line of code to establish file path, when you hand this macro off to somebody else and they try to use this subroutine, it's going to try to find, it's going to error out because it's not going to find JILIFF user. So that's unfortunate. What's nice is this little chunk of code, because what this little chunk of code does is it grabs your user profile from here automatically. So it'll be custom to no matter who is running it. So it's a nice little chunk of code here that you can use moving forward. We don't need this anymore. I was just using that for demonstration. Okay, so we're going to set the file path. So here's our file path. We're going to set the name of the file. Now, if we wanted to rename the file, right now it's called File Management Tax ID Data. If we, for some reason, let's say we wanted to rename it File Management Test File.xlsx, we could put that there. Otherwise, if we wanted to keep it the same, we could say file name equals active workbook dot name. Now remember that the active workbook is the workbook that's present to you. So right now, this is the active workbook. If I switch over to this one, and now this is active, this is present to us, so this is the active workbook. So in our flow, we just have to make sure that this is the active workbook at the moment we run this subroutine. So, I got the file name. Now, again, I don't want to use this file name. We want to rename it. You could use that if you wanted, but let's rename it. Now we're going to turn off so we have our file name. We have our file path. Now we're going to turn off our display alerts. And here is the chunk of code that we've been waiting for. Active workbook.save as, file path, and file name. So we're concatenating these two. So we're going to click. It saved that file. We can go test it by coming out to our desktop, going to our automation course, and you can see now that we have this file management test file, and then active workbook.close, and then turn on display alerts and end the sub. So what we did there was pretty cool. We learned how to open a workbook, whether it's hard-coded in or whether a user goes out and selects which workbook they want to open. We learned how to manipulate worksheets within the workbook, so create new worksheets, move them around, delete them, and so forth. And we learned how to then finally save and close a workbook. So these chunks of code right here, you're going to use all the time in your coding. And what you can do, what's nice about this, is in your future projects, you can just come, grab this, copy this chunk of code, paste it into a workbook, and all of a sudden you have, the code you need to do the operations you need. So we're going to end this unit with a challenge, and you're going to go out and you're going to find that file management challenge. And what that's going to ask you to do, it's going to ask you to put together an automation that utilizes this whole ETL process. So, hey, go open a workbook, make some transformations, and then save and close that workbook. And so when you start putting this all together, now you're at kind of full automation status.